Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today's topic is what can an LLM teach you about making chocolate? The answer may be a surprise to some, may not be a surprise to others. But before we get to today's topic, I want to remind everybody that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. You can go over to TheChocolateLife.com. This is the homepage right now. It's live. You can go to TheChocolateLife.com and you can click on this little green button up here. I'm logged in, so it says account, but you can click on the join button and you can become a member. I produce all of this content with the support of the members of The Chocolate Life and give it to everyone for free. But your support does help me do this, and it is greatly appreciated. I also want to remind everybody that you can go into the comments right at any point during today's episode. It's the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook or LinkedIn if you happen to be watching from there, and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. I will get that shout out up on screen and say thank you very much. And if you have a comment or a question about the topic of today or some other topic that springs to mind as a result of what it is that I'm going to talk about today, you can put it in the comments up in the screen. You can put it in the comments. I will put it up on the screen and we will get it asked, and I will do my best to answer it as long as it's about cocoa or chocolate. So with all of that out of the way, let us go and start talking about today's topic, which is what can an LLM teach you about chocolate? And for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post. And this post is a collection of resources and links and the run of show, the order of that I'm going to talk about things. And I do this so that you don't have to look very, very closely on the screen for the links. You can just go to the post if you do have ability to watch this and open up the website in another window. You can follow along without a problem. Otherwise, at any point, you can go back and refer to it. So the inspiration for today's episode was a post on Reddit, and this is the post. And the title is just "Common Mistakes in Making Chocolate." Now I had corresponded with a colleague of mine who said, "Hey, Clay, doesn't Reddit make you crazy?" And talking specifically about this sub. And the answer is yes. Being on Reddit for extended periods of time does make me crazy. And the reason why is that there's often a lot of reposting of the same question over and over and over again. It appears that people won't take the 2 minutes or 3 minutes necessary to say, oh, has this question already been asked and answered? And therefore, I don't need to ask it again. Right? So they'll just post the same question, a question that might have been asked 20 or 30 or 40 times already. And so in that respect, yes, it does drive me crazy seeing the same questions over and over again. Also, while the group is quite large, there are something over 65,000 members at the moment. It turns out that only a very small proportion of those members have any really significant expertise in chocolate, which is to be expected. So being a part of the conversation, and I check in almost every day, is to get out of my bubble. So, I'm in a bubble around specialty chocolate and craft chocolate and the conversations that have to do with, sourcing and sustainability and manufacturing and all of the itty bitty nitty gritty details that are involved in specialty chocolate and specialty cocoa. And so being a part of the r/chocolate subreddit, an active member, I'm in the top 1% of contributors to the sub, is a chance for me to find out what other people are thinking about, what other questions they're asking, what other things are on their mind. And in this respect, the r/chocolate subreddit is a lot less frustrating than the chocolate group on Facebook, which is much, much larger, but there are far fewer real experts in the group, people with experience in it. And so I tend to take a look at the r/chocolate. As I say, I visit on a daily basis. It's one of a very, very small number of groups that I am a member of. So let's go back to that post and see what it's about. Now, on its surface, um, what we can see, there's a flare here for this group. It's advice request, and so okay, somebody is looking for advice about common mistakes made in chocolate. And if you, I don't think you can read what it is that it says here, but it says, I recently came into possession of some cocoa butter and mass. I have tried to make chocolate using ChatGPT for guidance, but AI didn't warn me not to let it get warmer than 56 degrees Celsius. I still ate it. It was grainy. Tempering went kind of well, but I admit I was already a bit bummed out that it was so grainy, already a bit bummer out. Anyway, but now I made cocoa butter, and I was wondering, butter, Budder? That's a misspelling for butter, or what is it? For the second time, planning on making chocolate tomorrow. Still have about 120. So it's not entirely clear what it is that he's looking for, other than the chocolate is still a bit grainy. What are the new mistakes? I did weigh in on this. I asked him what prompt he used when he asked ChatGPT for experience, and I have got no response from that group. Um, and even if he was at ChatGPT, when he asked AI, what is it that he used? So there is a response to it. Said AI is a great tool, can help a lot. I would suggest telling it how your chocolate came out and asking how to improve. And so, in my experience, a large language model, a general large language model like ChatGPT, might not actually have enough knowledge domain expertise to get into a conversation about continuous improvement. It doesn't know, for example, what equipment, unless you tell it, again, I don't know the prompt, it doesn't know what equipment you're using. So I don't know that asking it how to improve is going to give me much in the way of useful advice. Did you use a wet grinder? And here's part of the really, really fun and interesting challenge. The OP, the original poster, says, what should I wet grind? What should I grind wet? So there's a fundamental lack of understanding about the equipment used. A wet grinder obviously is a small melanger. The wet refers to, it's working with water-based or oil-based products, not dry flour, for example. So peanuts, um, cocoa beans, cocoa nibs, as opposed to um, uh, some sort of grain or something like that. So the difference between wet and dry, that's what it is. So this person is, did you use a wet grinder? My guess is you didn't. That's why it's grainy. You can do some research or use AI to guide you through how to use it. But basically, you just leave it in there for a long time and it comes out smooth. Right? The OP says, what should I grind? Somebody else comes in and says, the cocoa nibs or whatever dry mass. So this is really confusing. Dry mass, wet grinder, hasn't asked the question, answered the question. Has to be ground into liquor first. Okay, into the particle size is about 30 microns. Isn't cocoa liquor the same thing as cocoa mass? So this is, again, is the OP, just a lack of understanding. So he asked some AI to weigh in the process without doing much research. And so, this is where it gets really frustrating. So we go back and forth, and it looks like, none of the people who are responding this have a whole bunch of experience in making chocolate. They're just weighing in areas that they have no expertise. And again, this is one of the frustrations of working, of being a member of a group like the r/chocolate subreddit, is that you, you never know. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You have no idea what the quality of advice you're going to get is. And in my experience, a lot of people who are non-professionals don't understand how to pose the question. And so the responses they get aren't ones that are going to answer the question that they really want to know the answer to. Everybody is responding to the question as asked. And not everybody will ask for clarifications, like, what did you mean when you asked that? Which I think is the first thing you need to do. But it occurred to me, oh my gosh, what if I asked a number of different LLMs to teach me about how to make a milk chocolate? And what I discovered was that there's sort of a Goldilocks and the Three Bears aspect to it. You'll either get something which is so generic that it's a very high level, 10,000 meter, 30,000 foot overview of the process without enough detail to help you get through it. or there's just an insane amount of detail that you need to take a look at in order to be able to figure out what's going on. And so, what I thought I would do to anchor this episode is look at a number of different LLMs and explore what we can learn right from an LLM. And there are a couple of different ones that I used here, and I used a number of different ways to get at the LLM because the way you get at the LLM and the question you ask will determine what the answer that you get. And then LLMs often have two different modes, one of which is a deep research mode, and the other one is sort of a general mode. And depending upon how you engage with the LLM, you will get entirely different answers. So let's go take a look at one. So this is a browser from a company called The Browser Company in New York. Let me share my screen. That will make it easier. So this is a browser called Dia. It is made by the same company, the browser company, that makes the Arc browser. And Arc is what it is that I use on a daily basis and have been using since beta test for 2 years. So I just find that it really does fit my style of work, which is one of the reasons why I use it. Dia is designed more as a research assistant, and so it has a user interface which is more like a conventional browser, but it's really all about how do I go about organizing different sources of information and then finding ways to go and create analyses of these different forms of information. So I might have, for example, I can have 3 tabs open, each one of which is pointing to a different website. And then I can engage in a chat and I can say, please summarize the similarities and differences between the 3 different websites in the tabs. Or there could be a document open in Google Docs or Proton Docs or some other online editing system. So it's really interesting. It's designed for people who are researching and answering questions on a daily basis. And it has a built-in AI so that if you don't give it a URL, it assumes you're asking it a question and it will respond. So it's pretty cool. So what I did is I asked all of the LLMs the same question, which is, I want to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from already fermented and dried cocoa beans. And by the way, this was important. If I just said I wanted to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from cocoa beans, it started out with, well, first you need to get cocoa beans and ferment and dry them, which is not the point. But this is the importance of understanding how to construct prompts. If you ask it a bad question, it will give you an incomprehensible or unusable answer. So I want to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from already fermented and dried cocoa beans. What are the steps? What equipment do I need? What is a good recipe? And here I am. I've asked it. If you're paying close attention, you'll see that I asked it this question twice. So I asked it yesterday and I asked it today, and it gave me different answers in some respects. So this is also important. It may be not only that what you ask, but when you ask it, you may get different results, which seems kind of crazy, but that is the case. So looking at the answer I got this morning, it gave me a couple of images that it picked up. It also listed all of the sources. So or at least the top 9. So it gave me 9 different sources. So if I want to, one of which appears to be TheChocolateLife, which is pretty cool. But you can go, and this is perhaps one of the more interesting aspects of the response, is that you do have links to the sources. So what you can do is you can open them up in new tabs and you can examine where they are like. So here's a high-level summary of the process. So to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from fermented and dried cocoa beans, you'll need to roast, crack, winnow, grind, refine, conch, temper, and mold the chocolate. It got every single step properly using equipment like a roaster, a melanger, thermometer, and molds. So it gave me a good 10,000 meter, 30,000 foot overview, right? I now know the individual steps that I will need to engage in, and I have an idea of some of the equipment that I might use. So the step-by-step process is, first I roast. It gives me a purpose. Why do I roast? How do I roast? The equipment that I will need. It says oven or pan baking tray. Doesn't say anything about a roaster, but that's okay. It gives me a rough temperature range, 120 to 150 C for 15 to 30 minutes, stirring occasionally. Listen for popping sounds. and watch for a rich chocolate aroma. So this gives you, right, the LLM really doesn't know what it's talking about. I believe that popping is first crack in coffee. That's what it's referring to. I don't necessarily know that there's a first crack in cocoa roasting, and I don't watch for a rich chocolate aroma. I sniff for it. It is what it is. It's easy to understand where the deficiencies are. Crack and winnow, remove husks. Crack beans with a rolling pin or by hand, then winnow, blow away the husk using a hairdryer or fan. Anybody who started off has put cocoa beans on a pan in their home oven. Put the cooled beans, which it doesn't say cool the beans, into a plastic bag. Use a rolling pin to crack them, and then fan them with a hair dryer. We've all been there, right? Rolling pin. So grinding and refining, turn nibs. So why do I do this? Right? Pre-grind nibs in a blender, add to a melanger with cocoa butter, milk powder, and sugar. Let it run for 24 to 48 hours. Tempering, melt and cool the chocolate. Anybody knows anything about tempering says, yeah, that while this is technically true, it's not enough to understand what tempering is or how to do it. Right. But what do I need? I need an oven, a rolling pin, a hairdryer, a blender, a melanger, a double boiler, a thermometer, chocolate molds. I mean, hey, it's done that. For more information, here are links. Go see the Chocolate Alchemy website, Indie Chocolate in Seattle. Here's a recipe for a kilogram of milk chocolate. So it's roughly 25% cocoa nibs, 25% cocoa butter, which means this is a 50% um, uh, cocoa content milk chocolate recipe. Um, and then 25% whole milk powder, 25% cane sugar. There's nothing wrong with that as a starting point. You may or may not like it. You might replace the whole milk powder with whole cream powder, or you could do a mix of whole cream, whole milk, and skim powder. There are lots of things that you can do there. Instructions: roast, crack, and winnow on beans to get 250 grams of nibs. Pre-grind the nibs, add cocoa butter. All the steps are there. Additional tips: add vanilla salt or other flavorings. The longer you conch, the smoother your chocolate. I would disagree that conching is just about texture. It's also about flavor development, which they don't talk about. But oh my gosh, I mean, if I was doing this, I would be able to have an idea about what it is that's going on to make chocolate. And it gives me primary sources for deeper explanation. And among other things, it gives me the Chocolate Alchemy website. So this is a pretty good, pretty good explanation. But here is exactly the same question asked 24 hours ago, and the answer is very different. The recipe is different. So it's 400 grams of cocoa nibs, 250 grams of powdered sugar. So that's 650 grams. So this is a 65%. Then, oh, I'm sorry, 400 grams of cocoa nibs and 50 grams of cocoa butter, optional. So this is like a 45% milk chocolate. The grinding and conching times are different. And so it's a different recipe. The process is the same. It gives Chocolate Alchemy as a source, and it also gives the Chocolate Life as a source, which I think is pretty cool. But up here, what it said here is it used ChatGPT 4.1 as the source of where it got this information. And if I wanted to, I could ask it to search the web, and that's the search that I got today, I think. Right? Which is I asked it to search the web and it gave me one response. I asked it to search Chat GPT and it gave me another response. So it's but now in one window I have the same responses. So this is one of the ways I just want to let you say is if you have an LLM, in this particular case, I'm using an interface to Chat GPT through a browser called Dia. Right? And I can get Dia to interact with the LLM in different ways, or I can ask the question in different ways. And so understanding how your browser interacts with an LLM is a really good thing to consider, right? Uh, you know, so again, what the LLM has given me, what the AI has given me at a very cursory inspection is a very simplistic understanding, again, at a 10,000 meter level of what the process is. But there's nothing here that gives me any experience. What should I be looking for? What should I be smelling for? What are some things to consider? So there's no sophisticated understanding of how to do what it is that you're doing. And this is because chocolate making is different from baking a pie or baking a cake, right? If I ask ChatGPT to give me a chocolate cake recipe, there's a lot of expertise. You've probably baked a cake before. And when it says mix or when it says add things together, you understand what that means, right? And that's not the same thing with chocolate. Chocolate is in a very, very different kettle of fish, so to say. So think about think about which how you're asking the question and how your browser is intermediating between, or if it's intermediating between you and the AI. Number one, just the large language model. That's it. So let's play the game. Let us go to Chat GPT directly. And so this is I'm logged into my Chat GPT account, and I have asked it the same question. I want to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from already fermented and dried cocoa beans. What are the steps? What equipment do I need? What is a good recipe? And it may not be obvious down here, but what I've done is I've got deep research clicked, right? And what Chat GPT did, right, is it said, ooh, right, to guide you through 1 kilo of milk chocolate for fermented and dried cocoa beans, could you clarify a few things for me? Right. So it has said, and I don't know how it evaluates this. I don't know how the neural network takes a look in this and goes, wow, this is a really open-ended question. I don't know how that works, right? But do you have access to any chocolate making equipment? Do you have a melanger? Do you have a roaster? Do you have a winner? Do you have a tempering machine? So it shows it knows a fair bit about the tools that are required to make chocolate, which is pretty cool, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to tailor its answer to whether you say yes or no to question number one. Well, I do have a melanger, but I don't have a roaster. I do have a winnower, but I don't have this. I don't have a tempering machine. It is going to. This is what a good interlocutor should do when you engage in conversation. So what Dia did, I turned sharing off. Okay, so here we are back at ChatGPT in the direct interface. I've asked it the question, and it starts asking me some questions. This is what I expect, right? Of an interlocutor. Tell me about what it is that you know. And this is what Dia didn't do, right? It just said, I'm going to answer the question. I'm not. So what I have to do is I have to go and engage in a follow-up conversation, right? So, but what Chat GPT did is Chat GPT said, okay, um, let's engage in that conversation first. And I'm going to tailor my response based on what it is you told me. So, do I have access to any chocolate making equipment? Do you want a smooth, professional, I would say European style chocolate? Or are you okay with a more rustic, right? What I would say pan hyphen American texture? Do you have preferences regarding sweetness? Sweetness, how sweet do you want it? What kind of milk do you want to use? It says condensed milk, which is interesting because you can't add liquid milk to chocolate. You would have to add all the sugar to the condensed milk and then cook it to reduce the water. Usually cook it under vacuum. You don't want to do sweetened condensed milk at home. It's not an easy thing to do. Or do you have any dietary requirements? EV vegan, right? So this is pretty cool. What kind of milk chocolate do you want to make? Right? Is a really great question. Once I have the details, I can provide the exact steps, tools, and an optimized recipe. Very, very cool. But this is Chat GPT plus, no, Chat GPT for everyday tasks. So I don't know if it's 4.1 or if it's some other version. So I don't know if they're actually using the same LLM, but it's pretty close. Let's go and take this exact same prompt, okay, but let's take it out of deep research mode and see if what Chat GPT does is give us a different answer. Here's a complete guide. So it looks like what Dia is doing is it's just going and um, interrogating the LLM, and it's generating It's generating a different, more in-depth guide. It knows a little bit more about tempering. It says heat to 45, cool to 26, 27, reheat to 29, 30, use a marble slab tabling. It's better, but it's the same LLM. It's the same large language model. I'm using ChatGPT. And so it matters what vector you choose. Am I going into ChatGPT directly, or am I going in and using some browser or other tool which is connected to ChatGPT? And how is that weighed? Again, am I doing just straight research? Am I doing deep research? You'll get very, very different answers as well. So it's really, really important to understand what you're looking at there. Now, it's also really important to know that within the Dia browser, what I can do is I can personalize the way the browser works. So, for example, right, it asks me who inspires you or shapes your taste. And so, what I've done is I've given Isaac Asimov, science fiction author, Edward Tufte, who is the author of one of the co-author of the book, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, and other books on information design, right? I like these people, right, are two people who inspire me. And then I've listed some brands and products, right, that also include specialty craft and chocolate companies. So I've given it some information about what inspires me. It says, how do I best digest information? And I've told it I like high level summaries with links to primary sources. I want to quickly pinpoint concepts to explore more deeply. And so both of these parameters, sets of parameters, right, uh, are transmitted by Dia to the LLM as part of its query, and they're helping shape the way the LLM responds. With ChatGPT, I could include this information as a part of my prompt. I could say, I am an experienced blah blah blah, and I like answers that are blah blah blah. And when you respond, ChatGPT will say, okay, given me what you've told about yourself, I will respond in that way. So you can do that with ChatGPT manually. All right. But Dia has that you give it this information and it makes it a part of every single query. Uh, if I change these things, these answers will update in real time. So it will change the query. It will come up with a very. If I were to say I'm a novice and I don't know anything, I'm a curious dilettante, it will give you entirely different responses, and that's really, really quite interesting, right? So I can take the same question, and what I can do is I can ask the same question from the perspective of four or five different perspectives, right? I can say, again, I'm a complete dilettante. I'm a foodie. I can give it some background, and it will change its responses. And what I can do, finally, when there's a third aspect, which is a writing skill, is how do you want Dia to write? I say I want it to be confident and informative, curious and informal. So that's the way I want the responses formatted. Okay. So if I were to go and use different personalities as part of the Dia process, so I would personalize it. Between each one, what I would do is I would copy the answer as text and then put it into a document and then copy each document. What I could do is I could put it into several tabs in my browser, and then I could go and have a separate chat conversation with the query, and I could say summarize the differences between all of these things. So this is one of the reasons why I like the Dia browser in some respects. It's still in beta, and I've been contributing my thoughts to how I think it could be improved. I'm not ready to move over to it entirely. There's too much about the way Arc works on a daily basis that I have become accustomed to over the course of the last couple of years. But I do like the interface in Dia, which enables me to change my personality as I'm asking the questions. We do have a comment from Sai Teha. I have no idea where in the world Sai is connecting from. They say hi. Hi back. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me know that you're watching today and giving us a shout out. let us know where in the world you're connecting from. If you're here in the US or you're outside the US. And if you have any comments to make about the idea of, ooh, what can I learn from an LLM about making chocolate? Very, very cool. Thank you very much. So we've taken a look at two different ways that ChatGPT can be involved in working, in giving us ideas about how to make chocolate. There's another LLM, which is out there, which is Google's Gemini. And I asked Gemini, whoops. So I'm in the Gemini 2.5 Pro. That's because I'm always asking for reasoning and math rather than fast all around help. I do have a pro account as a part of my Google Workspace subscription. And so I asked it the question, I want to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from already fermented and dried cocoa beans. What are the steps? What equipment do I need? What is a good recipe? And even though here I am not in the deep research mode, what it has done is it has done an insane amount of editorializing, right? So it said, I just want, what are the steps? What equipment do I need? What is a good recipe? It's given me all this stuff. So crafting your own milk chocolate from fermented and dried cocoa beans is a rewarding journey that transforms humble legumes. Cocoa's not a legume. Cocoa beans aren't legumes, right? Into a delectable confection. This is one. I mean, I did a recent episode on how do you know about if an AI has been involved in writing something, and this kind of hyperbolic language is a tell about that you've got something which was written by an AI. So it requires patience and dedicated and specialized equipment. It's achievable for a dedicated home chocolatier. This guide will walk you through the essential steps, the necessary equipment, and a reliable recipe to produce 1 kilo of smooth and creamy milk chocolate. So sorting and roasting, not bad. Roasting is a critical step. It gives me 20 to 30 minutes at 120 to 135 C. Lets us know the ideal time and temperature can vary. I mean, all high-level advice that's not wrong, right? Cracking and winnowing. For small batches, this can be done by placing the beans in a bag and gently hitting with a rolling pin. You can use a hair driver, grinding and conching, adding ingredients, tempering. It's done a very good job, and it's the sort of thing that I could print out. Now, all right, so, and it's given us a recipe, 350 grams of cocoa nibs, 150 grams of food-grade cocoa butter, which is interesting. I know that a lot of cocoa butter is used in pharmaceutical applications, but I don't know that I've necessarily seen cocoa butter being described as food grade. But yes, you want food grade cocoa butter. So this is so this is 350 plus 150, 50% cocoa content milk chocolate recipe. I think it's very interesting that all the milk chocolate recipes here have been 45% to 60% cocoa content, all dark milks, quote unquote. Granulated white sugar as opposed to powdered white sugar. Vanilla bean optional. Soy lecithin optional. It has a pre-grinding step in a blender or food processor until a thick paste. Transfer the paste to melanger, let it grind for 2 to 3 hours. So one of the things that this version of Gemini is, it's given you a little bit more, actually, compared with the other, compared with ChatGPT, it's given us a lot more detail. And there's a lot more to consider. And so if I was new to the process and I was reading carefully, that I would know a lot more about the chocolate process. So it's pour the tempered chocolate. Once the conching is complete, it tells me I need a digital chocolate thermometer or infrared thermometer. If you are going to be measuring the temperature of chocolate for tempering, if you're using a bowl tempering method, you want an instant read probe thermometer. If you're tabliering, so if you're doing it on a marble table, an infrared thermometer is fine. Using an infrared thermometer to get the surface temperature of volume of chocolate, a bowl of chocolate or if it's in a melter, less precise. The surface temperature is one thing, the temperature in the middle is something else. So, these are the sorts of things that you learn by doing through experience. And if the LLM were to go into all this detail, you probably would just like run away screaming, right? So a reliable recipe for 1 kilo of milk chocolate. It gives me all of this. Now, what I did is here's a clue, right, for using Gemini if you ever use Gemini, or again in the Dia web search version on for ChatGPT. It says show your sources or show your thinking, right? And so I like to see the the process that Gemini describes that it's going through. So I've begun delving into the chocolate making process. I've shifted my focus to practical aspects. I've just begun a deep dive into bean to bar chocolate making. I've clarified the need for a precise 1 kilo recipe, right? So, oh, cool. I mean, think of, go through and spend the time to understand how it is that the LLM has arrived at the process. Now, it doesn't talk anything in here about its sources, right? And so I went through and says, what are your sources for the above responses? The previous response was generated by synthesizing established knowledge from my training data on the subject of bean to bar chocolate making. So it's open, right? So I have a in my corpus, in my repository, in the things that I know about, right? This is what I know about. If it's not in my training data corpus, I don't know about it. I can't include it. Really, really important limitation that not only is the LLM limited by the way the neural networks are constructed to arrive at the results that it does, the results that they do. What's also important is what's the training data. And so the Google Gemini training training data set will be different from Chat GPT's training data set, will be different from Mistral's training data set. And we could ask, again, exactly the same question at the same level of specificity with the same neutral position. And that's why we get entirely different answers. They have different training data sets. But it says it has looked at chocolate alchemy, which is pretty good. They've looked at a book by Kristen Hard, which is called Chocolate Alchemy, a Bean to Bar Primer. I've done a review of that book. I'm not a huge fan of it for a bunch of reasons. They've also looked at the Ecole Chocolat website. There's a Manoa Craft Chocolate TV, and then some other books, The Science of Cooking, the Institute of Culinary Education. So yeah, and with links to all of these sorts of things so you can follow them. That's really, really good. Right? So you can go and do uh, a, a more a more targeted survey yourself with the source material, with the training data that uh, the the um, the LLM knows about, which I would recommend that everyone do is follow these things. Right now, notice this little button down here that says deep research. And what I did is I asked Gemini exactly the same question, um, using, I think I got it backwards, using the deep research prompt. All right. So this is this. So I've done the research and I've said I want to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate. It's up here on the left from already fermented and drying cocoa beans. What are the steps? And the deep research goes away, ponders on this. Right? I don't know that thinking is the right word. And it says, okay, I've created a research plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to research websites, not just its internal training data. That's one of the differences between a regular search and a deep research. So it goes out and searches the web. Um, it's going to research websites. It's going to research and outline the complete bean to bar chocolate making process. So it knew that I was talking about bean to bar chocolate making. For the initial stages, find detailed instructions for each of the steps. So it knows what the steps, find a represented recipe, detail, explain scientific principles behind tempering, describe common tempering methods, outline. So, and then you click on the start research button and it generates a research report. And this is the research report. And this report is a gazillion pages long. So what it's done is it's not only answered the questions, which is, I want a, what are the steps? What equipment do I need? What is a good recipe? What it's done is it's written a monograph, right, on a comprehensive guide to crafting 1 kilogram of milk chocolate from the bean, right? So what are the foundations of milk chocolate? The bean to bar transformation, a process overview. Because there are a lot of websites that are associated with this, what it will do is if you see a down arrow anywhere in here, you'll see it will give you where it found that information. So it found information from Rainforest Alliance, interesting, as well as Pump Street Chocolate. And Pump Street Chocolate is a great chocolate maker. Any advice that they want to give, I would pay attention to. So it talks about the initial and perhaps most crucial flavor developing stages of fermentation and drying occur on the farm. So I've asked it with already fermented and dried, and it goes back there. The flow chart illustrates the process: pod, harvest, ferment, dry, sorting, roasting, cracking, winnowing, grind and conch, temper, mold, chocolate bar. Yay. Where did it get that? Again, Rainforest Alliance and Pump Street Chocolate. So we've got that. So the architecture of milk chocolate formulations and ingredients. What are the 4 pillars? Nibs, butter, milk and sugar, cocoa nibs, cocoa butter, milk powder, sugar, powdered milk. The choice of milk powder, full fat skim, or even non-dairy alternatives has a profound. So it's again given us a monograph. So it said we want the answer to simple questions. We want you to do some deep research, and what it's done is it's written, 10,000 words. I actually haven't done a word count on this, but it's done 10,000 words, where it could have come back with a lot fewer. So the process of formulating milk chocolate is a delicate balance between flavor and fundamental physical traits. It's a domain of rheology, the science of solvents of viscosity. It talks about, wow, I mean, if I really want to do a deep dive, I can go in there. Yield stress, the Casson plastic viscosity, right? If I'm a chocolate maker, chances are I may never have gotten to this level of detail. For the home artisan, the most critical factor is total fat content. By adjusting one ingredient, milk powder, for creaminess, directly impacts the chocolate's rheology. By increasing the solid particle load and reducing the overall fat percentage in the recipe. I mean, this is really, really good stuff, right? And there are parts of it sound like it's written by an AI, but there are parts of it that could be interesting to go. So milk chocolate formulation matrix for 1 kilogram batch. So it has a classic creamy milk, which is a 50%, again, dark milk, but it's 50-50 between nibs and butter. A high cocoa dark milk, so wow, 42% cocoa nibs, 7% fatted fat, so 49% dark milk. A chocolate milkshake style, vegan milk. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good information here. So equipping the home chocolatier, a non-negotiable investment. It says, if you want to make a decent chocolate, you have to have a melanger, which, yeah, I would agree if you want to do it. So it says affordable, start between $300 and $600. Other equipment you need, a digital scale, DIY versus specialized equipment. I mean, this is great. So tier 1, it says explore the apprentice, the master, and it gives different budgets for what you're going to look for. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm tempted to just, I'm just tempted to publish this after making some careful edits. The step-by-step process of making a kilo of chocolate: roasting, sorting and cleaning, what's going on during the roasting process. So some Strecker degradation. By the way, Strecker reactions are also happening in the mouth. And it's one of the reasons why chocolate flavor is complex as it is. As we hold chocolate in our mouth for longer, there are interactions between the chemicals in the saliva and the chemicals in the chocolate that create these Strecker degradation reactions. This is something that I learned at the British Society of Flavorists conference when I was in Belgium last October. So it's nice to see that there's a connection to the science that I'm going on here. Milk chocolate roasting profiles for a home oven. light roast, florist and fruity, medium roast, cocoa balance, heavy roast. Oh my gosh, and it gives different time and temperature ranges for this. This is pretty darn cool. Cooling, uh, let's see, the separation of cracking and winnowing. I mean, this is dang. I mean, it's done a good job. I mean, how to use cocoa butter silk, how to make cocoa butter silk, how to use cocoa butter silk, how to mold and degas. Degas is getting rid of air bubbles, I'm assuming. So degassing is weird. So cooling and settling, demolding, advancing the craft. Oh, here's a list of troubleshooting problems. Oh my gosh, right? The role of lecithin, what it does chemically, what's going on with milk powder variations, incorporating inclusions. I mean, this is insane, right? It's given us a glossary of technical terms, an appendix, a glance into commercial standards, the FDA standards of identity, right? It actually has linked. No, it actually hasn't. I have to go. I'm not going to go do it now, but the question is, did it actually link to CFR 21.163? It doesn't mention CFR 21.163 directly. And here's the most fun and important part. Here is a list of every single resource, right, that is cited as any footnote in any of the above. The Chocolate Life is there, forums. When do I add lecithin? How do I create a DII winnower? Um, there's an article on aging chocolate. This is like oh my gosh, more Chocolate Life, right? So yeah, totally. I mean, it's nice to know that the Chocolate Life is a part of is the forum site, which is been there. So this is really really cool. Now, also importantly, there's a list of sources read but not used in the report. So this is an insanely good reference to what it is that's going on, right? Um, and while it does give you an overview of the process, and this process overview is much more detailed than the Chat GPT overviews or the whether it was directly to Chat GPT or it was mediated through DIA. And this is one of the reasons why I like Gemini. I will ask the question two different ways: regular research and deep research. And sometimes what I can do is I can copy those into online documents, and then I can open those documents in DIA, and I can ask DIA to start making some comparison questions. That's something I can't do in Gemini. So knowing that you have more than one way to approach answering the questions is really, really cool. And I think really, really important as well. So again, you know, I talked about the DIA and the Chat GPT sort of being like 10,000 meter overviews. I think that with the deep research in Gemini, we might say this is a 1,000 meter overview. We still don't know what we don't know. It doesn't tell you anything that it doesn't know about. There's still a lot of experience, which is absolutely necessary in order to be able to take all of these things and make consistently good chocolate consistently, right? Which is part of what I think of as mastering the craft. And so that's what I want to talk about really, really briefly about another. I did not add this link because if you're not a LinkedIn, well, I don't know. If you're not a LinkedIn member, you might be able to do it. So some people may know the name Sharon Terenzi. She talks to herself about she thinks of herself as the chocolate journalist. That's how she identifies. And she did a post on LinkedIn 2 days ago. Machines aren't external tools to help craft chocolate makers in their craft. They are the craft. It's a pretty bold statement that the equipment you use is the craft of making chocolate. And I am gonna put the link to this in the post for today's episode. It'll go up after we get done, right? And there is a link to a video on YouTube, and I'm not going to put that YouTube video link in the post, but it will be in the LinkedIn post and you can go to it. I will do it. But so she says, they are the craft. The machines are the craft. It sounds paradoxical, an oxymoron. Craftsmanship should all be about the skills of the human, the bare hands that create something special out of nothing, the talent of the artisan, exclamation point. But it turns out that in this industry, the human expertise also includes the talent of purchasing, understanding, modifying, and optimizing the machines to make chocolate. Right? So after spending so long in chocolate factories and labs, I finally see how an intimate relationship between the artisan and the machine is created. And I, and I think that that's part of what it is that I'm talking about when I talk about, if we use an AI, if we use an LLM like ChatGPT, like Google Gemini, what it will do is it will give us a description of the process. That description of the process is not a replacement for experience. So I have Melanger A or Melanger B, I have Cracker and Winnower A or B, I have Roaster A, I have Roaster B. I need to use all of these tools to understand what their limitations are and what they're good at. And so what I wanted to say about Sharon's observation is, to the extent that it is true, it is trivially true. And so if I'm a woodworker, for example, not a chocolate maker, then the tools I use are going to have an effect on what I make and how I make it. So if I'm only using hand tools, for example, it might be the size of projects I take on is going to be limited. It may be that I have one saw and this saw is good for something, and I have another saw and that saw is good for something else. Right? Whereas if I have a table saw, right, it's good for other things, right? And so understanding which tool to use when it is appropriate to use the tool and when it is inappropriate to use a tool, and understanding how to use it, not just when to use it, is a part of mastering the craft, right? Becoming a woodworker, understanding the artisan, right? The craftspersonship, the craftsmanship aspect of the things. So again, as I mentioned, what Sharon is saying, to the extent that it is true, it is trivially true. But right, to make the connection to what can we learn from an LLM, the LLM can't help us understand those issues. What tool to use, when to use it, right? If I have a particular tool, right, how do I use that tool in the best possible way? There is the 10,000 hours idea. Like, I need to work with this stuff for, an extended period of time before I understand these things. And I think there is a sense of false confidence that using an LLM can give you in doing this. So I do want to caution that you can use an LLM. What you can learn from it, what it can teach you, is an overall understanding of the process at different levels of detail, depending upon which LLM you use and how you ask it the question, right? Are you going to let it do the research, right? Or are you going to engage in a conversation with it, or both? So, for example, I can go to Gemini, it's given me this report, and what I can do is I can ask it questions about the report. It will go and review what it is that it has said, and it will say, so I could say, okay, I now that you've given me a milk chocolate recipe, right, can you just give me white chocolate recipes, or can you give me dark chocolate recipes? It could do that. So there are things that can be done here, but understanding the limitations of them is really, really important about the journey that you're going to embark on. And this is where the person who did the work, let's get this, the person who went and asked Reddit, and the people who responded to the post don't understand the nature and limitation. They don't understand the chocolate making process well enough to understand what the LLM, the AI, is or isn't telling them. Right? And It is that experience. So when we talk about LLMs dumbing people down, I just, without critical thinking skills, I'm just going to do what it tells us because it knows more about everything than I can possibly know. That is the issue that people are talking about when they say that LLMs are dumbing people down. You need to approach the results that they give you with critical thinking skills, understanding, oh, this might be incomplete. What else do I need to ask it? Or if I ask it a slightly different way, what different answers might it give to me? Right? Can I get to any of the specifics that I'm looking for, realizing that this is just a neural network operating on data, right? And there are limits to what it can possibly know about, right? And that's the real important realization to make. Um, there's one last oh, by the way, there's a Chat GPT service called Sora, Sora. It will make images. It's doing a much better job in tech, using text. The general Chat GPT mechanisms, or image generation tools, Adobe Firefly, things like that, are generally really rotten when it comes to working with text. So Sora. So because what you ask, the prompt, because what you ask, which LLM you ask, and the vector you use to get answers all matter. So I asked Sora to do two quick illustrations, right? Using the prompt, can an LLM teach you how to make chocolate? All right, so I used the title of this episode, right? And these are the two images it got. So one is roasting, cracking, grinding, and tempering, roasting, grinding, adding ingredients, conching, and tempering. Okay, right? It's adding liquid milk here, not okay. Um, it's using cracking. I would say this is not how I want to crack, although I suppose I could crack in a mortar and pestle. It's grinding the nibs. This looks like a coffee grinder. Coffee grinders are used for dry grinding, not wet grinding. So likely whatever you're using. So again, huge limits in terms of what it can be done. Go take everything that comes out of your LLM with a grain of salt. And then finally, for today, there's one last LLM I want to talk about. By the way, there are some of the comments that I've been writing about AIs and things like that. So you can go more. And then my position statement on using AIs here in the Chocolate Life, there's a link to that as well. So DuckDuckGo is a search engine. And what I can do is I can ask a search engine how to my question, I want to make 1 kilo of milk chocolate from already fermented and dried cocoa beans. Tell me how. So it's 50% cocoa liquor, 25% sugar, 25% whole milk powder, no added cocoa butter, right? That's, interesting. It used the Chocolate Life forums. There's a post on making milk chocolate, right? And I've just asked it to go and take a look, and it's giving me more information. All right. So conch, the mixture. So the search engine has done an okay job at doing this. It's it doesn't know much about what it is that I'm doing. And so it's given a very, very high level response. Now, this is using the LLM called Mistral, Mistral. So it's different from ChatGPT and it's different from Gemini. Um, but if you look up here, there's also Duck AI. And so this is a much deeper interface into using it. I've got the prompt stored, right? And it gives a different recipe, which is interesting. So 500 grams of fermented and dried cocoa beans, roast, crack, and winnow, right? But this recipe is based on beans before cracking and winnowing. It's a 55%, 50 grams, 500, 300, it's a kilo. Yesterday, it was giving me a recipe that started off with 1 kilo of liquor, which I thought was really, really strange. But here is how Mistral goes through and describes how to go about doing this. And so, however, if I want, I believe at some point, I can't see it right now. Oh, it's using the Mistral Small 3 algorithm. And at some other point, I thought I had the ability to change the model that it was using. I don't see it here. And from this, I can go back to the other one. So this is another LLM, and it's giving us a different response as well. And this is really, really important to understand. Okay? So we're at the end of the hour. It's gone by very, very quickly. Uh, the point that I want to leave everyone with as a part of this episode is that there are very, very significant limits on what an LLM can teach you about making chocolate. And it can give you an overview of the process. Sometimes the overview is very, very high level, right? 10,000 meters, 33,000 some odd feet, or it can be much lower level, 1,000 meters or something like that, right? What it can't do is it's not a substitute for experience. The question, not the question, but the point that Sharon Terenzi was making in her post on LinkedIn, there's a video on YouTube where she goes into it as well, is that the craft of making chocolate is understanding how to use the tools that you have, right? And that is certainly a part of it, right? You need to have an aesthetic as a chocolate maker, you have a position. This is the kind of chocolate that I want to make, and your decisions around the aesthetic are going to drive all of your other decisions about what you want to make. So if you decide that you want to make a 2 ingredient chocolate, you may find that some continuous tempering machines won't do that for you. You're going to need a continuous tempering machine that has a strong enough motor and has a long enough tempering pipe, if you're using a continuous tempering machine with an Archimedes screw, so that you can generate enough crystals in the time that it is in the tempering pipe. And that's a lot harder if you're making a milk chocolate, because you just increase the viscosity and there's less fat. There's less cocoa butter, and so it's the cocoa butter that crystallizes. Those kinds of realizations, that kind of understanding, are not things that an LLM can teach you, and that is mastering the craft of making chocolate. And with that, I'm done for today, except for to close the day out. This is the post for today's episode of Pod Save Chocolate. I'm going to add the link to Sharon Terenzi's LinkedIn post, but all the other links that I shared to, other than Dia, I can't share the Dia links through this. I am not going to share the Gemini deep research here. I will share it somewhere else. I'm not entirely sure. I want to edit it because I think it's important to go through all the steps and make sure that we understand what it is that's going on. I can't share the link to it, unfortunately. I wish that I could. But this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. I produce this, and the resources I have to produce this are supplied by the members of the Chocolate Life. It is published on the web for free and for anyone to use. And your support of the Chocolate Life, even if it's just a free membership, gives me the resources to go ahead and do what it is that I am doing. So please go to the Chocolate Life. Here is the homepage. The homepage is live. And you can click on this little green link up here. And again, I'm logged in, so it's this account. If you're not logged in, it'll say join or sign up. And when you do that, what you can do is, among other things, you can engage in the conversation. So we have a member discussion at the bottom of every single one of these posts where you can ask questions, not just in YouTube, not just on LinkedIn, not just on Facebook, but as a member of the Chocolate Life, you can engage directly with me about any question you have on any episode or any post that's on the website. I take a look at everything. And with that, yesterday was World Chocolate Day. So I hope everybody enjoyed World Chocolate Day. They celebrated in their own way. I changed up, as I said, I changed up my morning coffee ritual to include hot chocolate, made a mocha, and enjoyed that. I was using chocolate mass, which was made from beans, which came from Ecuador. So that was a nice connection to my background and the trips that I've made into producing countries. And that's it. That's it for today. But I want to end, as I do every single episode of Pod Save Chocolate, to remind you, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. With that, everybody, ciao, until the next time.